Welcome back. I'm Kim Bailey and this is Floral Art Review, and I apologise for my voice. I'm hoping that it will last through the whole of the video. But I've been doing some deep cleaning of where I live, and it's probably 4 years since some of the items of furniture have been moved, so I've created a little bit of dust and a little bit of activity, and I'm suffering from it today, so I thought I'd do the video rather than do any more cleaning. Good excuse, I know. Today we're using our AI, DesignEye, to analyse a design of mine that was in a competition a couple of years ago, and it was a great fun class title and design that I put together. And what you're seeing on the screen, the images of the cake slices, was actually inspired by a wonderful Canadian-based designer, Christine De Beer, and I encourage you to have a look at her website and sign up for her weekly newsletter about designs. She is quite an inspiration, very, very artistically based, and thinks outside the box in terms of floral art design. Back to this design, the title was Slice of Cake. We had 60 centimetres of width to use, and as you can see here, I have depicted something of a high tea. I couldn't find a proper tea stand to use, and so what I've actually used is a glass plate, a large glass plate at the base with a lace doily underneath, and then I've used tumblers or glasses in between the heights to give me that same look of a cake stand and two colourful plates. And then the cake slices themselves are corrugated cardboard, just layers of it glued together and cut to shape. And the icing is either paper or bark. I've used both paper bark and standard bark off the trees here. I have painted the top layer of some of them just to give it a different texture. I crushed up some of the bark to make it look like chocolate flakes on the edges. And the plant material that I've used is succulents, some statice, and strawberries, obviously, as you can see there. And some coconut fibre as well I used on the bottom layer, I can see as well. The construction of the design is always great fun, and I've used the slices in different designs across the years and just adjusted their format and the way they look. For my mind, because this was a competition where we were allowed to use paper as part of what was classified as plant material, so I'm happy that in some competitions there might be too much of the cardboard, too much paper and not enough plant material, but I was happy that this came together well. And I really like the design. I really think that it evokes the idea of a slice of cake, and the feedback that I got, I put the image, after it had been judged, I put the image up on social media and got lots of comments about how I had to look at it twice. I couldn't really work out whether it was real or not, because I've interspersed the real strawberries with the pseudo cake. It just gives it that lift of making you look at it twice, which is what we want in a design. Interestingly, I have to say, the design was not judged in the competition because the judge felt that it didn't depict the title. The title is Slice of Cake, and what the judge was looking for was a single slice. After the judging came through, I argued that each of those was an individual slice of cake, but to no avail, and the judge's decision is final. We have to accept that. That was based on the judging that happens in this country. I know in other countries not as much weight is put on the interpretation, more on the other principles and elements of design. So it'll be interesting now to see what DesignEye tells me, because its interpretation, its analysis, is based on the principles and elements of design. So let's see what it's got to say. Overall, first of all, the title Slice of Cake is interpreted in a playful and imaginative way. The designer has chosen to represent actual cake slices using natural and found materials arranged on a traditional tiered cake stand, which evokes a high tea or celebratory setting. The visual pun is strong, with believable cake textures created from layered corrugated cardboard, coloured substrates, bark, and plant materials that mimic cake layers, icing, and toppings. So it got the idea without me having to explain it. I will say that when we submit a design, it is simply submitted with the image and the title. No other instructions, no other information. So I know that I'm getting a very independent analysis of my design, and that's why I place so much emphasis on these being very useful for your education in terms of floral art and your floral art journey. Let's now look at the individual elements and principles of design and see what has happened there. So line, first of all, lines are predominantly horizontal and diagonal, mimicking cake slices and drawing the eye around each tier. Subtle vertical elements such as the bark upright, which is the top piece of cake on the top layer, introduce visual interest and slight tension. Curves are absent, reinforcing the angular sliced form and allowing the geometry of each slice to dominate. Now, in fact, one of those cake slices is a circle. It's on the middle level, but because from this angle of the image you can't see it as clearly, the analysis has not seen that as a circular image, a circular form. I will say, if you are going to upload an image for analysis, make sure that the image that you take shows the design in its entirety. This, obviously, I took this image when the competition was on and I knew what it looked like, and I wasn't thinking about AI in those years, so it was just taken as here is the design image. Had I been looking at uploading it for DesignEye to have a look at, I would have crouched down slightly a bit more so you could see each level clearly, and then the circular piece of cake would have been a little bit more obvious. Form. Each cake slice is three-dimensional and convincingly cake-like, with clearly defined form and mass. So it's interesting that it sees those individually, as was my argument with the judge, that they are individual cake slice. And so you could look at each one of them being a slice of cake. But we won't labour that point. The sculptural volume and height of the overall composition are supported by the tiered cake stand, creating a pyramidal form with excellent balance. Now, as I look at it now, and maybe it's the angle of the image, but I'm a little bit concerned about that it's a bit top heavy, that the top part, the top level of those tiers is weighted more than the other ones, and it might just be the angle of the image, but it might also be the placement of the cake slices in each of those individual layers. Texture. Texture is the hero element here. That's good to know, because as you know, if you've looked at any of the videos, texture is my thing. Corrugated cardboard, rough bark, coconut husks and spongy succulent rosettes contrast beautifully with the smooth strawberries and shiny plate surfaces. Visual texture convincingly mimics real food, triggering a sensory memory. So isn't that interesting that if you're depicting something in your story that your design is, that if it triggers another memory, it will reinforce the way that you have interpreted the design, and so that helps with the judging. Colour. Earthy browns and neutrals provide a naturalistic base, while yellow, red, green and purple are used sparingly but effectively for emphasis. Strawberries add vibrant red contrast, catching the eye and enhancing realism. The bold patterns and colours of the plates serve as additional pops of colour and whimsy without overpowering the natural materials. So that's important too, in that the container that we use doesn't overpower the plant material that we've used. And I like the idea that it's not necessarily a colour palette that we would consider using, but bringing them all together by having the actual colour pops be very strong colours against the very neutral, more prevalent forms, means that we can use colours that we wouldn't necessarily see together. Space. Good use of negative space between the tiers allows each slice, again, to be appreciated individually. I will say nothing. The asymmetrical spacing of slices prevents monotony while keeping the arrangement open and inviting. So what it's saying there is that I haven't got all the same, and I knew I didn't want to have all the same slices. I could have done, but I wanted to have different shapes, and I wanted to have them at different angles. I haven't quite managed that with the second and the bottom layers as well as I have with that top layer. And it might just be that I've pushed them a little bit too far away from the front of the design. Balance, asymmetrical yet visually balanced. Each tier has different numbers and types of slices, but weight is well distributed. The visual weight of red strawberries and textured slices is countered by more delicate additions like succulents and pale toppings. So as I said earlier, I was concerned about the balance, that the top layer looked too heavy in comparison to the others. It's interesting that it's looking at asymmetrical balance, and that it really is the placement of those slices, because those two, the middle layer and the bottom layer, I've got two slices that look very similar in terms of their finish, and perhaps I needed to think about placing them on not one under the other, but in different positions on those layers to create a little bit more of a balance, even though it's saying that it is visually balanced. And I think that's because of the symmetry of the placement of the tiers, I should say, not the placements, but the tiers. And so we have that evenness of space and line. But let's move on and see what it's got to say about rhythm. Repetition of shapes, triangular wedges, materials, corrugations and bark, and strawberries provide rhythm across all three levels. The eye travels easily from the top to the bottom tier, guided by the alignment of slices and colour placement. So it's incorporating the colour that's in the plates themselves as well as the placement of the plant material. And I do think that it is very rhythmically balanced because of that repetition of shapes. You know, there's nothing jarring, there's nothing throwing us out. The one thing that probably could do that is that the bottom level, the glass base, is not the same as the others. And so perhaps what I should have done is looked for glass plates all the way through or coloured plates all the way through. So let's just move on to the next one, which is contrast. Strong contrast in texture, rough bark versus smooth berries, colour, neutral brown versus vivid reds and purples, and form, geometric wedges versus round fruits, keep the viewer engaged. So what we've got is contrast in three areas that we would look at individually, and we have looked at individually in terms of the principles and elements of design. We've got contrast in texture, contrast in colour, and contrast in form. Now, that might lead to it being too visually busy, but because although the contrasts are there, particularly in the form, it's not jarring because there's still rhythm within it. So we looked at the rhythm just a minute ago, and the rhythm was about the placements and about the repetition of colour. And so even though there's contrast there as well, it still rhythmically works in terms of the design. Unity and harmony. Despite varied materials and shapes, the theme unites all elements clearly and charmingly. Repeated use of certain materials like cardboard and bark brings cohesion and prevents distraction. So this sort of relates back to the contrast and the rhythm as well. That, as I've said in other videos, if you get one of these things right, the others will flow through. You can't just get one thing right and the rest of it's out of place. You either get them all right to a certain level or you get some more right than others, and that brings you to the point where it's united and it's harmonious as a design. Dominance. Each slice is a focal point in itself, but collectively the entire cake stand dominates the composition. The upper tier draws more attention due to its elevation and vibrant elements, establishing a clear hierarchy. I guess that's the case, and it's reassuring because I'm still concerned about the visual heaviness of that top layer, but it is because we can see all of the cake parts, whereas the others are a little bit hidden. And it's interesting too that it once again sees each slice as its own individual focal point, which is not what the judge saw on the day. I said I wasn't going to say anything more about it. So let's have a look at some suggestions for this design. Number one, tighter detailing at the base. The bottom tier appears slightly less resolved than the top tiers. A stronger base layer, additional berries, or another texture echoing the upper tiers could provide better visual grounding. And so that's what I said earlier about the plate. So I think probably what it needs is another of those coloured plates on the bottom rather than the glass plates going up the top. Because what happens if you've got the glass plates on the 3 levels is that the glass starts to be very dominant in the design because you've got glass in between the layers as well. And so it would be harder for me to make the cake slices those focal points. So I think I'd probably take out the glass plate at the bottom and put either another of the coloured ones or a single colour that is repeated through those other layers. I would also put more strawberries on the bottom. I think it needs a bit more fill on that bottom level. It's looking a bit sparse. You can see through it too much space. Number 2, plate patterns. While the plate patterns are joyful, they somewhat compete with the materials in the slices. Consider using plainer crockery next time or more subtle patterning to allow the cake textures to shine even more. And I agree with that. I think it's got to be 3 of the same, and I think they've got to be a little bit more subdued in their colouring so that the cakes shine through. I mean, if you think about a high tea that you go to, you don't get the tiers in very vibrant and bright colours because they want to focus and showcase the food that's on those layers, and that's what I should have been doing as well. Number 3, enhancing movement. A slightly more dynamic arrangement of slices, e.g. turning some off angle or having one partially bitten, could add a playful sense of movement and story. I like that idea. I mean, this whole design is a bit of fun anyway. And to have one that was slightly chewed would be a very interesting, bite mark in it, and I could just have shaped the cardboard to make that happen. Would have made the judges smile, I think, to have it that way. And it would also help if, and I think I talked about it earlier, if I changed the angle of some of the placements of some of those slices. So once again, another suggestion that I would certainly look at. Number 4, strawberry placement. A few of the strawberries are tucked away. Slight repositioning to ensure they're all fully visible would maximise their impact both as contrast and realism anchors. And once again, that's very true. I think I'd probably use more. I think I'd probably fill up a lot of those spaces with strawberries or other berries, other fruits as well, just to make it interesting and to bring that realism and that sense of are those cake slices real or not, because everything else on the plate is real. So just a little hint of a question mark in the judge's eyes. So the final overall thoughts. Slice of cake is a clever and delightful interpretive design that shows great skill in mimicking real-world forms through natural and manipulated materials. It's visually engaging, texturally rich, and successfully tells a story with humour and structure. A wonderful example of contemporary interpretive work that balances artistic vision with botanical creativity. Nice pat on the head for me at the end of that. Certainly throughout that some suggestions that I would take on board, and I would have been interested to see the judges' feedback on this one had it been judged at the time. But that's what we face when we're competing, is that there's always going to be a judge there. On that, at this time, for this release of this particular video, so if you're seeing it later than 2025, you've missed out. We are launching through Floral Art Online, a global competition, online competition, that will be judged by AI. You can find the details on the Floral Art Online website and through social media and all those sorts of things. But it's a very exciting project. It's a world first, and I'm sure that there will be more information available through all the channels. I'll put the link to the website for the competition in the description of this video, so that if you're looking at it in a timely fashion, you'll be able to consider entering as well. What we are ensuring is, and the reason we've been testing AI for such a long time and putting these videos out, is that we wanted to make sure that it was going to give us very independent analysis of the designs. And you'll see on the website that there's the show rules and there's how it's going to be judged. So it explains in quite good detail how the system will work. We're looking forward to it. We're looking forward to seeing all sorts of designs from people who wouldn't perhaps normally compete, can't for whatever reason, in terms of geography or time. You have from the time that the entry is open 6 weeks to upload your image for judging, and it will be an exercise in training our AI as well to look at a range of designs from around the world where all of the judging criteria in terms of human judging is different, and bringing it all into one place where the judging is the same. So a truly independent analysis of your designs. If you wanted to put up a design for a bit of a practice run and get an idea and get some of these great suggestions before you put your final design through, just go to the website floralartreview.com and upload the image, follow the instructions there, and you'll have your results back within about 24 hours. I will leave you now to think about all of those things, all those bits of news, and I'm going to go and have a real slice of cake. I'm Kim Bailey, and this is Floral Art Review.